It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hockey News Big Show. I'm your host, Katie Gaus, joined by my co-host, Michael Traikos, and our special guest host here with us yet again. We've got Ottawa Senators site editor Steve Warne joining us, and I am on the road in Lake Placid this week, so me and Steve have got the fancy backdrops, making Michael feel real left out, stuck in that office.
I got to
nice
work
drywall.
on my. I got to get some more stone in the background.
Yeah, that's we didn't give you the stone memo. It's the vibe we're going for now with the show. All right, guys, let's get into it because it's almost time for playoffs, but we actually get a little treat because we do have our very first Stanley Cup playoff series officially locked in. The Carolina Hurricanes will host the New Jersey Devils in round one. So I want to just get your thoughts on this matchup, kind of what we expect the identity of this series maybe to look like, and then we'll get into some predictions. But let's talk about what we kind of expect to see from these two teams. Michael?
This is a series that, I don't know about you, Steve. I feel real good about the Hurricanes, and this is one of those ones where just because Jack Hughes is missing, and I'm not really sold on how the Devils are situated up front, I still think they're really small. I've got the Canes basically, and we're going to talk predictions, but I really find it hard to believe that the Devils can beat the Canes in this series. I think it's going to come down to goaltending. I don't feel great about Jacob Markstrom in New Jersey. I feel a lot better with either Frederik Andersen or Kochetkov.
Yeah.
And I guess the big wild card for me now is Alexander Nikishin coming from the KHL. This guy is, a high-scoring defenseman. He's exactly what the Hurricanes need when you're talking about the players that they've lost last summer on defense. And to get this guy, I don't know how much of an impact he's going to make, but he could be the big wild card.
The only thing I see really is you mentioned Markstrom. I think he might be potentially your wild card. He hasn't had the best of first seasons with New Jersey, but he is something they haven't had before, or at least last year. He's a guy that can be a big game goalie. We know that. But that .899 save percentage this season, he was dinged up quite a bit, but he's right now. He's the one guy that I think could potentially make a difference. Freddie Andersen, for example, is playing very good hockey for Carolina, but we know from his history that he's had some struggles. So that's the one area that I think New Jersey could succeed in and maybe pull off what I think would be a monumental upset. But that's really the only way that I think that can happen. The Jack Hughes thing you mentioned, Michael, that is so huge. That's like pulling McKinnon off of Colorado or here in Ottawa, pulling Tkachuk.
Sure.
It's just, it's such a big loss for them, and that's unfortunate. And I think there's a coaching mismatch here as well. I think Rod Brindamore is a considerably better coach than Sheldon Keefe, and the in-series adjustments that will need to happen. I think that this is all Carolina for me.
So we've seen a lot of high-flying games from Carolina lately in terms of some of the scoring. Do we anticipate this would be a high-scoring series, or do you think it's going to be a little bit more defensive, like in terms of just kind of what each game might bring? I know everyone can be different, but what do we kind of just anticipate in that regard?
I think if it's low scoring, it plays into Carolina's advantage. I agree. That's the way that Rod Brindamore likes to coach. Got to keep in mind that these teams have split their season series, and we don't know who's going to have home ice advantage. So, I agree with Steve. Like it would be a monumental upset if New Jersey beats Carolina. That being said, New Jersey could be the higher seed, and they don't have pressure. I think that's the other thing that we got to keep in mind is, with everything that happened in Carolina, Micheal Rantanen, that decision kind of blowing up in their face, Carolina's got a lot to prove to their fan base and internally that this wasn't a lost season, that this wasn't a mistake. And, obviously Logan Stankoven, let's look to see what he does in the playoffs. But with New Jersey, not having Jack Hughes, there's almost that buffer now where you're going, all right, even if we lose in the first round, the fact that we made the playoffs with what's gone on this season, basically they're playing with house money in that regard.
Yeah. Steve, start us off then. If we have to make a prediction, it kind of sounds like I know who you think is going to win, but how many games do we think it's going to take?
I think it'll be quick. I think it'll be 5 games, and I think there's so many advantages. I talked about a few of them. The building is another one. That's just such a great place at playoff time for Carolina. And this has been it almost feels like a destiny series. These teams keep running into each other. We're going to talk about Edmonton and LA, how they do that later on in the show. But these teams have played a lot. Like the Canes have only made the playoffs in 12 years since moving from Hartford. And 6 of those years, this will be the 6th time, they'll have run into the Devils. So there's a good little rivalry here. And this was destiny. If you go back, and I did the math last night, I actually went back, click, day by day, going back. These two teams have been in a head-to-head playoff matchup in that 2-3 slot since December 31st.
Wow.
So this thing has been brewing for a long time. The coaches have no excuse. You know, they've known for a long time they're going head-to-head. They should be well prepared. But I got Carolina in 5 here.
All right, Michael, what do you got?
I'm not even feeling that strong about New Jersey. I'm saying sweep all the way. Carolina 4.
That was kind of my gut instinct too. Just getting it in 4. But again, I think that where Steve made the point about Markstrom, that could be the game changer. Like, I don't think necessarily Markstrom's coming in here and winning them the series, but I think he can win them a game, maybe 2. So, all right, Carolina, probably quick. That's what we've got. Let's move on to talk a little bit about the Minnesota Wild, because they fell into a wild card spot. You know, they're still hanging out there, kind of treading water. It felt like they've dealt with more injuries, it seems like, than most teams in the league, but they got a huge boost. Kirill the Thrill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson are both back in the lineup. And Kaprizov, he wasted no time, literally comes back in, scores the OT winner, second goal of the game for him in his first game back. We've got Steve Warne now, whose season is over because DU was knocked out in college, so he could be joining. So how do these additions, the potential of Warne, change the way that you maybe feel about Minnesota as a playoff team, Steve?
Oh, I'm going to rain on the parade a little bit for Minnesota Wild fans, because I feel like we have to keep in mind that Kaprizov, is great a player as he is, and I love the player. He hasn't played since January. And yes, you're right, Katie, he had a great first game, but part of that's adrenaline. You know, you're back in the lineup. And then part of that is your opponent is the San Jose Sharks.
It was a crazy game, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that's not going to be a typical game moving forward. And so it's a little bit like trying to jump onto a moving train. No matter how good a hockey player you are, he's kind of in preseason mode at the moment. And so he's got to kind of get back to speed. So I think he'll do it soon, but will it be soon enough to be an impact guy like we expect Kaprizov to be? He'll be an impact guy compared to everybody else in the NHL. But by Kaprizov's standards, will he be that level of impact? I have my doubts. And it's a lot to ask of a collegiate player, particularly on the back end, to come straight in and be an asset for the team. I think about Jake Sanderson and his early days coming from the University of North Dakota to the Ottawa Senators. You saw the excellence, you saw the potential, but as far as impact, as far as a guy who can be a game changer right away, which is what Bouillam's going to have to be, I don't see that.
Yeah, it's a different world. You talk about the jump. I mean, college to pro, it's not easy. And even if you are the most skilled, like, especially considering, like, he's not just jumping in when it's kind of garbage time. I mean, these are going to be the most intense games going. So certainly the stakes are even higher. That's a big ask. But Michael, what's kind of your temperature on Minnesota as we head to the playoffs?
Similar to Steve, just because, nothing against the Wild, but they're either going to see Winnipeg, or if they get lucky, they're going to see Vegas.
It's tough.
I don't want to play either of those teams if I'm the Minnesota Wild. Kaprizov could be the guy that, makes it interesting. I understand he's missed a ton of time. That being said, even if he's at 70%, this guy, all he does is score goals. Since breaking into the league, only 7 players have scored more than Kaprizov, and that's missing basically 30 games as a rookie and half the season this year. So he's a sniper. Joel Eriksson, I don't think he's going to score 4 goals every game, but what he does bring to the table is just one of the better two-way centermen. And if he can lock down on Mark Scheifele, that's another X factor. And we'll see what their goaltending brings. But Minnesota, I believe they're going to be first-round fodder. It's just a matter of, do they stretch that series to 6 or 7 games, or do they go out real quick?
Yeah, I mean, they are another team that's not playing with any real pressure. I mean, they weren't even very active because they couldn't really be at the deadline. It's not like they went out, got these acquisitions. There's expectations. They still have those 2 contracts, I think, on the books that are almost done. So next year might be the year, but it's good experience. And to get Kaprizov going a little bit, we'll see what he's capable of. Well, let's talk about the series we were alluding to earlier that it just never goes away. The LA Kings and the Edmonton Oilers locking it in probably again for, what is this, the 4th chapter of their playoff story. Edmonton has gotten the better ending for the most part. So how could this time be different for the Kings? And does it feel like this Kings team is more equipped to change the story, or maybe it's the Edmonton team that is the problem that will allow LA to do it? What do we see there, Steve?
Well, I think, we don't have to overthink it a whole lot. Just look at the standings. You look at the last 3 years, Edmonton entered as the better team. They were the higher seed in each of the last 3 years and ended up as the winners. This year, finally, LA's got a few points on them, and they're a better hockey team this year. And I think that the sting of the losses of the last 3 years are going to serve the Kings very well. There's a lot of players on this team that have been through those heartaches against the Oilers. And so I've always been a big believer in the fact that the revenge factor is real. And so I really think the Kings are going to win this series.
Yeah. Michael, what's your thought?
Yeah, I don't ever want to bet against Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl. They're just, it's the same as, do you ever bet against Sid Crosby and Malkin back in the day?
Yeah.
The one difference is, it really is just McDavid and Draisaitl this year. Like, their depth took a huge hit. And I look at the Kings and, they've got Warren Foegele now, who's, scoring at a clip that the Oilers could really use. Like, they've gotten 48 goals from their third line of Foegele, Deneau, and Trevor Moore. The Oilers don't even have that, even on their second line if you take out Draisaitl. So, the depth favors the Kings. The defense favors the Kings. Gosh, the goaltending more than favors the Kings.
Big one.
And it really is going to take a, out of this world performance by McDavid and Draisaitl. I'm not saying that they can't do it, but that's a lot to ask of 2 guys when you're going up against a team where it just seems like from top to bottom, they're just deeper. And as Steve said, having a better season.
Yeah, it's all true. I mean, like you said, Steve, you don't really need to overthink it. LA is the better team in the standings. It does feel from a consistency basis they have been throughout the year. The goaltending to me is a big factor, and I think that is something that could really get Edmonton into trouble. But we will see. It feels like this is the year for the Kings to change the script. All right, well, it's Friday. So, guys, let's get into our top 8 contenders for the week. Little changes. I'm going to pull up. We got Steve's list here first. So, biggest changes that I'm noticing from yours, Steve, is that last week you had Edmonton. On yours this week, they are off. You've moved Dallas up from last into second to last. You got Florida down there on the bottom. You didn't have Florida last time because we talked about your thoughts on Tampa. So what are kind of the biggest changes and the influences for why you kind of made these moves?
Well, I had Dallas, I probably should. I still love them. I mean, the roster's amazing, but just looking at the last 7 days in terms of changing of dynamic, I think about the Stars and what they did this past week. And they've lost 3 games in a row, and the nature in which they lost them, like that loss to Vancouver at home, like one of the great collapses in NHL history, to give up like 3. They had a 3-goal lead with it just over a minute to go, and they somehow lost in overtime. Like crazy. Like the kind that can rip your soul out. And then they follow that up by getting trampled by the Winnipeg Jets 4-0. So I don't know, maybe Dallas is leaking a little oil here at the end. I'm not sure, but Dallas is the one team that right now is kind of fluid for me. And I mean, there's not too many big changes. Winnipeg moving up a little bit. I love that win. I love the fact that the Jets, even though they're as great as they are standings wise, they seem to be flooring it still. Whereas a lot of teams, kind of resting this guy and resting that guy. It just seems like the Jets are, just going for it and don't care about circumstances. And so I think they could do some serious damage this year.
Yeah, I mean, I like Winnipeg. What do you think about Steve's changes, Michael, before we get into some of the ones on your list?
I agree a lot. Like, I've got Dallas, last week I had Dallas as my top 3 team. They're third overall. I've since dropped them to 6.
6, yeah.
And that's basically, more along the lines of what Steve is saying. I think as we get closer, Katie, we're starting to figure out, okay, who's going to play who
Yes.
and who's coming back. And it looks like Heiskanen is definitely not coming back for game 1. I even question, are we going to see him in the first round? And if we don't see him in the first round against Colorado, well, how much of a
It
difference
might not
that's gonna
be a round 2 that he can come back in.
Exactly. So that's my big move. St. Louis, I don't have anymore. I've
You
moved
bumped them
Tampa
off.
Bay into my top 8. Again, that's more along the lines of, do I see St. Louis taking down Vegas? And as we get closer, it's becoming less obvious that, St. Louis could probably get past them. Tampa Bay is one of those teams where I could see it next week having them in my top 4, maybe even replacing Florida. Again, it's going to be dependent on, is Matthew Tkachuk even coming back for game 1?
Right.
What is Aaron Ekblad going to look like when he gets back? How many
Yeah.
games, what is the series going to look like when he gets back? So, that's really the big movers right now. Winnipeg is my number 3 team. Again, that's because,
Moved them
we
up,
just talked about who the first round opponent can be. And I feel really strong about the Jets beating the Wild.
I like it. And you've got both of you, or I believe, no, you both have Toronto kind of right there in that mix. Actually, Steve, though, this week you still don't have them on there. Is that just again because of their matchup?
Geez, Steve, you're really showing your Ottawa colors here.
Yeah, I probably am. It's just
He just can't make himself put Toronto on the list. He won't do it.
Well, I think it's a life-threatening allergy. That if you guys have an EpiPen, I can go objective for you and slide them into the top 8. But for now, can't do it.
Okay.
I like it. All right. Well, guys, I mean, when you're making these lists, I guess just the last thing to think about is, because again, we talk about the matchups, but I mean, I think injuries are the biggest one. But how much are you kind of worrying about the play right now with teams that know they're in who are resting players? Right? Like, I mean, we've seen Florida actively taking Sam Bennett out, just saying straight up, he is resting. Like, we're letting him take that time. Does it factor in? Because I think we talked about this last episode. You have to be careful that you don't get too rested that you're not ready to hit the gas for game 1. Like, how do you balance that?
For me, it's the team, Katie. Like with Florida, I'm not at all worried that they're going to be able to flip the switch. And same thing with Tampa Bay. If they decided to rest Kucherov and say, forget about winning the Art Ross trophy.
Even give Vasilevsky like a break, right?
Yeah, I guess you could give him a break. Like those two teams, because they've been there, they've done it. They know what it takes to win a cup and get your game in order. I'm less concerned, but it's more along the lines of, Dallas still has a lot to prove, and them not having Heiskanen or some of their players back, that's where I get a little worried. Same thing with Washington. They've had basically the top seed sealed up since in 2024 in December, basically.
It's been a
So
minute.
that's a team where I'm kind of wondering, okay, are they going to be able to just turn it into playoff hockey now that Ovechkin's got the record and it's almost like they can exhale a bit?
Yeah.
That's a worry for me.
Yeah, I think it's a situation, and I agree with everything you say there, but I measure it out more from what each individual player's situation is. So are you sitting out, but also practicing?
Sure.
That is a player I do not worry about. But if it's a player who is way out of his routine and he's missing practice and home watching Price is Right, and out of his routine, that's the player I do worry about. And the teams that have the most amount of those types of players in their sitting out, those are the teams that might have some concerns hitting the ground running. Like I say, jumping onto the moving train after you've taken 8-9 games off because of a specific nagging injury and you're not practicing. If you're practicing, don't worry about you. But if you're not, then I do.
Yeah, I mean, like Colorado didn't play Nathan McKinnon in the last game. Pretty sure we're not worried about him being in shape and ready to go whenever any game. I mean, he could take a whole week off. He'd be skating and grinding, and that guy he can flip the switch whenever he wants. But I agree with your points on that, guys. All right, well, let's talk about some fresh meat coming over to the NHL. We've got Ivan Demidov to join the Canadiens after a joint decision between him and SKA over in the KHL. He's coming he's actually, I saw the video. He's like in America now. Here we go. He's made his
He's in
way over.
Canada, actually.
North America. Sorry, North America. Although I didn't know if he was meeting the team somewhere, where he flew into, but
He
yes.
flew into Toronto's Pearson Airport,
Yes.
and Habs fans were mugging him
I
there.
saw that.
Talk
Some
about hype.
crazy people. I wasn't sure if I thought that was cool or weird that people were just there waiting and chanting. But either way, he has made his way to the North American continent and he is ready to go. So, can we talk a little bit about, for people that maybe don't know about him, because this is getting a lot of hype? What is his game? What should people be looking forward to for seeing him play over here the first time? And what kind of boost could we see this give Montreal?
Well, he's a Montreal prospect, Katie. So the hype is as high as you can ever
Of
imagine
course.
it, because
Yeah.
seventh round picks are treated as if like they've already started etching their their
The
likeness
Hall of
into a
Fame.
statue. Yeah, they kind of treat their players like gods in Montreal, which is why we love the Montreal Canadiens as fans here. But Demidov seems like he's at least worth all the attention. Like fifth overall pick, like Matvei Michkov. If he hadn't been Russian, he probably would have maybe gone second or third overall. Maybe not second because I think Chicago wanted a defenseman and they ended up going with a Russian defenseman. But this guy, 19 goals, 49 points in 65 games in the KHL. And that's while fighting for ice time, basically, in a league that, does not give their youngsters, teenagers, any ice time. So the hype seems real. I think the only question mark is, for a Habs team that is looking at a playoff, does Marty St. Louis throw him into the lineup, knowing that there's probably going to be some, bumps along the way as he learns the league?
Yeah, and they're rolling right now too. I think as we record this, they're on a 6-game win streak. So it certainly isn't like you want to, mess with any type of chemistry just to get him in there. But what do you see from him, Steve? What should we be looking forward to?
Well, I mean, just I'm a highlight guy. I don't see a lot of KHL, but from what I've seen on all his long highlight packages, man, he's when you think about that expression, puck on a string, this guy's it. Like I've seen some of the rushes that he's had. It looks almost like a ringette player, the control he's got with the puck just going past guys. And so I like everything I've seen. He's got decent size, so that's not a concern to jump right into the NHL. And he's been playing against men. Michael outlined his stat line. That's pretty damn impressive to be playing in the KHL against men and putting up those numbers, which implies that he could do same here. The only caveat would be, the only concern I might have would be, because obviously come playoff time, defense wins championships. And if you've got a young Russian player, and let's be honest, a lot of the young Russian skill guys come over here with absolutely no commitment to defense. Don't know the story from that perspective, but if that's a concern, then it's something Marty St. Louis will have to kind of monitor, along with, integrating him into the systems, getting him to figure out things and do the right things defensively, because we all know one single goal, one single breakdown could be the difference between you moving on to the next round and not.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is. It's tough at this time of the year, right? We've even seen it with some of the college signings, right? Guys coming in and they're, I mean, I'm not sure I agree with all of them. Like if you're the New York Rangers and it's like you're not even really fighting for it anymore, like give Gabe Perreault a little bit of time. But again, you're messing with chemistry, and every coach is going to have a different approach on how they want to integrate younger players, knowing that there are going to be challenges for them. It's not an easy transition like we talked about earlier. So, all right, well, let's talk about a veteran in this league. And when he was asked if he was going to be returning to the Canucks next season, pending UFA, Brock Boeser said, quote, "Honestly, it's unlikely at this point. It sucks. It's unfortunate." So seems like that era is certainly coming to an end. So, Michael, where do we see him ending up?
I'm going to start with the obvious pick. I'm going to say Minnesota. He's a Minnesota guy. They tried trading for him reportedly at the deadline. So, I could see him being on the Wild. I don't know if necessarily that's the guy that they're going to be eyeing in the summer, but like I said, it's a pretty obvious pick for me. The other ones I would just say is Seattle needs offense. Utah could use another veteran up front. And let's not forget about the Boston Bruins. They've got a lot of cap space, and who doesn't want to play for an original six franchise like the Bruins? So those are my top picks there.
Okay, so You've cleaned off the table there, Michael. So I'm going to just,
anyone else?
There's no one else. Maybe Ottawa.
I was going to say, in sheer desperation to contribute to this conversation, I'll throw the Sens into the mix.
Yeah.
Simply because maybe family ties matter. His uncle Dan is a scout with the Ottawa Senators. Maybe there's a sell job to be done over the summertime at the cottage when they hook up. Maybe because that's Dan Boeser's job to bring in players to this organization. So, hey, maybe there's and that's a bit of a long shot. It's a bit of a Hail Mary, but I'll throw the Ottawa Senators into the mix for the same reason I talked about Brad Marchand.
Yeah.
Steve Staios did say, and there goes my earpiece. Steve Staios did say back in around the deadline, he would have liked to acquired one more veteran. And so I threw Marchand's name out there for that reason. Maybe we can throw Boeser's name in the mix for that reason too.
I don't think it's that crazy though, Steve. Like if I'm Brock Boeser, I'm looking at it like, okay, what do I want? Do I want to win a championship? Okay. Is Seattle going to get me there? Probably not. Utah? Maybe not. Boston? Not with where they're at right now.
No.
Ottawa, on the other hand, they're
on the up.
A big jump this year. The chance of playing with Brady Tkachuk is probably not lost on a Brock Boeser as well. You're going to get protected. If anyone takes any liberties with you, you've got Brady there watching over you. I don't think that's really out of the realm of possibility. Maybe a year ago or 2 years ago it was, but I think a lot of players, they should be high on what the Senators look like today and what they could look like in the next year or two.
Well, here's a quick follow-up just to kind of touch on this. So he'll be 28 at the time of being a UFA. What do we like for this contract? I mean, especially with the cap going up, what do we expect? Is he going to be worried more about getting a bunch of term or cashing in big money? Where do we kind of see him in terms of like where his value sort of stacks up against some of the guys that will be up in the league?
Have you got his contract in front of him?
Yeah.
Now?
So right now, 3 year, he was on a 3-year contract for it was 6.65 AAV. So
boy, that's tough to think he'll get a raise on that. It's tough to, based on his stats coming down a little bit this year. It's hard to believe that he'll be a ton more than that. So I think he'd be looking for term, as everybody in their late 20s are. And if he can get something in and around where he's at right now, give or take $1 million, I think he'd jump all over that.
Yeah, I mean, with the cap going up, I kind of assume maybe he'll want a little more because I think everybody is going to expect a little bit more. That's sort of just the theme these days. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, we're talking about a guy that should be scoring 40 goals every year. He should be in the Jake Gensel kind of category, except he hasn't been as consistent a scorer as Jake Gensel has. He had 40 goals a couple years ago. This year, only 25. I think that's the real concern is, if you think that you could pencil him in for 35 to 40 every year, he'd be getting probably closer to what Gensel's getting. But, I'm with Steve. Like I think he'll get an increase over what he's getting this year, but it won't be that much more, I don't believe.
Okay, fair. I guess it depends on the team too, who's got money and really wants him. Let's talk a little bit about which team looks like they might miss the playoffs. We're getting closer. More and more teams are getting eliminated every day. So either might miss or already is out of the playoffs that we're expecting to actually take an even bigger step backwards next season. Like things are going to get worse before they get better. And there are a few contenders for this category.
I'm going to go with the New York Islanders. I think we could probably see either of the New York-based teams, just how miserable it's been this year. But, we could be looking at a top-to-bottom, a real change in Long Island there with Lou Lamoriello as the GM. I don't know how long he's going to be in that role. We're going to talk about Patrick Waugh's comments and decision-makings later on in the show, but that one's not looking that great. And then when I look at the actual Islanders, aside from Matt Barzal and the goaltending, what is there really to be excited about there with the Islanders? And for me, they just seem like a team that has always punched above their weight. And I think that's kind of coming to an end.
It's all fair.
I'd be inclined to go with the Chicago Blackhawks. I know it's hard to go from, ground zero to get even worse.
Go backwards.
But I really don't think, I don't see them making a big step forward. Now, obviously, what do they do at coach? What do they do in the summertime? I just see a lot of young players who are really discouraged there right now, and they're going to have to do some pretty special things this summer for me to get excited about that team. I think they thought that Connor Bedard would take a big step forward, and it's just been the opposite. He looks like a kid that's, mentally having a tough time right now, and I don't think he's alone in that area. So I don't think Chicago is ready to take that step forward, but I reserve the right based on the summer they're about to have to change that take. But here and now, for everything we know, I'm not seeing a big jump forward.
Yeah, I mean, all of this can change, right, with a couple of the right moves. And I mean, the same thing can be said for teams that maybe feel like they're on the bubble and they don't make the right moves or they don't do enough. So definitely remains to be changed. So we'll let you have that one. But I think both of those answers are certainly very fair. The Islanders one in particular, I feel like is just every year they get right to the edge, and it just feels like that has to end eventually. And they haven't done anything to make them feel like the future is bright. It just feels like things are stagnating in the wrong way. All right, well, listen up, hockey players. You don't need to drop a fortune on sticks when you can grab a pro-level composite stick at Stix.com. That is Stix.com. Go check it out. Lots of inventory there. Lots of good stuff for you to see. All right, guys, let's hit some rapid fire. We actually were just touching a little bit on the Connor Bedard experience. And of course, things haven't gone great since his rookie season, but let's focus in on just some rookie years for him and Macklin Celebrini. So in the rookie seasons, Connor Bedard, 22 goals, 61 points in 68 games. We've got Macklin Celebrini, 24 goals, 62 points in 66 games and counting because he has a few more left here. So if you just had this information, if you've seen these two guys in both their rookie years, who would you take first if you had the choice between the two?
I'm leaning Celebrini right now, and I think the
Recency
difference
bias,
maker
right?
for me, yeah, the difference maker for me is gonna be their defensive game.
Okay.
Celebrini looks like he's gonna develop into more of a two-way forward, whereas Bedard, he's gonna live and die by his goal and point totals, and right now, sort of dying by them.
Yeah.
Hasn't taken that step forward, as Steve said. I don't think it's quite as bad as we're talking sophomore slump for this guy, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of that is based on the fact that Chicago has just done a terrible job of insulating him. It basically is, if you're facing the Blackhawks, you just have to shut down Bedard, whereas
Yeah.
if you're playing the Sharks, you still got Tyler Toffoli, who's actually having a really good season there, as well as Will Smith. And, I feel like the Sharks are in a better spot right now. So it's Celebrini for me, and it's just because of a more well-rounded game.
Okay.
This is such a hard question.
He doesn't make it easy on us there.
Well, it's such if I was a scout and we were doing a redraft, which of these guys would I take number one? It's like, oh man, I guess it would. I just think that the uniqueness of Bedard, and I know I just in the last segment talked about the issues with him, but I still think he's so unique in that shot and that release that he has. Is you put him in a situation like obviously Ovechkin is an entirely different player, but you think about the power play opportunities and what I think that Bedard should be putting up comparable numbers to Ovechkin because the uniqueness of his release, his ability to get open, his vision. I think that he should be way better than he is right now. I think he's in a discouraged place at this moment. And it's just that's part of the reason I love Celebrini too. You could talk me into that without too much trouble. But I will take Bedard because of that release and that offensive upside.
Yeah, it's so hard because again, one's not in their rookie season anymore. One is struggling. You also have different levels of support for each, but good answers, guys, because that is a tough one. All right. Well, Philly has won 4 of 5 since the move to get rid of our friend John Tortorella. Michkov has 4 goals, 8 points in 5 games. Tyson Foerster's doing well. They're both getting a little more ice time. So if you've got the gift of hindsight now, did the Flyers make the right decision getting rid of Torts with less than a month left in the season?
Well, it's certainly a situation where you have to be careful about the end of season silly time and assessing whether you made good moves or bad moves. I think back to the Senators, it's like 4 years ago now. They finished out the season 9-2, and the whole city was like, "Oh, they've arrived. Watch this." That's 4 years ago. Do you have any idea how much bad hockey has happened since then?
Yeah, they were
So
not arrived.
no, they certainly were not arrived. And so assessing what Philadelphia is or is not based on a new coach, got to be careful with that. And I like
Sure.
Tortorella. I don't think he
Yeah.
was necessarily the sole reason. I stand to be corrected again moving forward. If the Flyers go on a heater to start next year, then maybe there's something to that. But this is such a small sample size in worthless time now for the Philadelphia Flyers. Some of it could be just the pressure coming off, not just the pressure of Tortorella, but we're out of the playoffs now, boys. Here we go.
Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah, I'm not looking at the wins necessarily by the Flyers as the litmus test. For me, it's ice time. And we're looking at Tyson Foerster's ice time. I think he's getting something like 4 more minutes a game.
Wow.
That's big, even in garbage time. I think that's why Danny Briere decided to make the decision. Obviously, there was a reported blow up between Torts and Cam York that apparently could not be repaired. But I think it's mostly you've got a few weeks left. How do we utilize those weeks and make sure that guys like Foerster, guys like Michkov, and a lot of the other young players that they have there, at least finish the season strong and go into the summer feeling good about their games and know what they can work on for next year. And I think that's what the Flyers have achieved right now. I bet Michkov's feeling great about his game. I bet you Tyson Foerster, who hasn't been doing really anything this season, is feeling really great about his game. And if that can kind of continue into next year, this coaching move is looking like a genius one.
Yeah, and I mean, we still don't know exactly who might even be at the helm for Philadelphia once they get through the summer and kind of decide what moves they want to make from their organizational standpoint. Obviously, they bumped their associate head coach up, so we'll see what happens there. But I think that's a good point because there is something to be said for how you handle young players, and it did feel like because I love Torts too, and I think on the right team he still can be an excellent coach. But it definitely felt like right now with what was going on with the team with the young guys, it was past its time. He was just not the right coach anymore, and that's okay. And hey, head into the summer feeling good. Maybe that is the right thing. All right. Well, speaking of coaches, let's talk about Patrick Waugh. He put in a 21-year-old AHL goalie, Tristan Lennox. The team was down 6-1, and then he pulled him after allowing a goal on 2 shots, and they ended up losing 9-2. A lot of people were unhappy about this. Thomas Hickey on MSG was talking about it after the game. It rubbed him the wrong way. Did this bother you? And is Waugh on thin ice more than ever, maybe after this move? Because people were not happy with how it was handled.
Yeah, they haven't been happy with Patrick Waugh for a while now, Katie.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Anthony Duclair comments that blew up in his face and the organization's face. I'll give Waugh credit because he admitted that it was probably a mistake and that he probably should not have put Tristan Lennox in, who had only played in 4 AHL games this year since returning from a long-term knee injury, hadn't even practiced, and then gets thrust into this. The goal was a terrible goal, but then again, do you blame him? And then pulls him out.
Right.
He may never get another game in the NHL, as Thomas Hickey was saying on the broadcast. And I think that's the difficult thing is, we think of wins, losses, and just stats, but these are humans, and these guys work so hard just to get to the pro level, never mind the NHL. And then to get embarrassed on the grand stage like this, it was unnecessary. And obviously, this was one that Waugh probably wishes he had back.
Yeah, I mean, these guys spend their whole life thinking about what that moment is going to be like. And again, it's not going to be perfect for everyone, especially in a goalie situation, like where you aren't, you're not getting the start, you don't get the rookie lap. But to have it go down that way, it's just kind of awful to think about because you really don't know with a goalie at his level if he's going to get that next chance to sort of create a new memory. Like if this is it, that would be a huge shame. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, it's surprising that the mistake was made, and he admitted as much as Michael mentioned. Because, and this will put me in a certain vintage, but, most hockey fans would be aware Patrick Waugh was a Hall of Fame goalie for a very long time, a very good goalie. And we just passed the 30th anniversary, I think, of the whole blow up, right? The night in Montreal when he's getting pumped for like 9 goals against Detroit. And that led to his leaving the Montreal Canadiens. So for a guy that played the position, for a guy that had that experience, you would think he'd be uber sensitive to a young player in those circumstances. And he knows he made a mistake. Patrick Waugh knows he made a mistake, and he admitted as such. But it's surprising the mistake was made. And it does go to, what is your process when you're behind the bench? Are you super emotional back there, or are you thinking the game the way a good coach should and thinking about all the variables that happen, the game within the game? Because a guy in your position with your history should have known what you were doing to the kid. And he can say, obviously, the kid's never going to say anything bad about his coach. That would be probably bad professional decision making. But in his heart of heart, he gets in there and that happens to him. That was embarrassing for him.
Yeah. Oh, it's tough. It stinks. And I think you make a really good point because, again, these coaches are responsible for so much. And it does start to call into question again some of the decision making that we are seeing. We know that he is a very emotionally driven guy. We've seen it throughout some of the things in his career. So start to wonder what might be happening on the island with Waugh and the Islanders. All right, well, let's talk real quick, guys, before we wrap it up. Not going to make you give me too much reason, but the national championship will be taking place on Saturday for college hockey. We've got Western Michigan and Boston University going for it all. Michael, who's your pick?
I'm going to go with Ryan Kennedy's pick here, all along Western Michigan. You take down the champs in Denver, and they just outshot them. Like, that game should have been a blowout. That should have been the 9-2 game, Katie.
I know.
I'm going to take Western Michigan over this one. They just seem to have all the offensive weapons cooking right now. And, I hope it's a good game, but I'm taking Western Michigan.
All right, Steve, what do we got?
Same deal. I think they've won a pile of games in a row. They are the King Slayers, and you always have to respect them. I'd like to take Brady Tkachuk's alma mater, but I will go Western Michigan as well.
Yeah, you knock off the champs. It feels like they're just poised to do something great. And it would be cool because we would get a very first time national champion in the Western Michigan Broncos. So it's always kind of neat to see a new team, especially in today's college landscape where it is so much harder than ever for these big teams to compete against each other, to have a new guy in there, some fresh meat, winning it all. It'd be fun. I'm going with Western as well, which is what I said from the beginning. I second guessed myself. I got caught up in Denver, but it is in writing. I had Western winning it all. So let's ride it out. Let's go Broncos for the final one. All right, guys, good stuff. Thanks so much, as always, with the top 8 contenders as we get closer and closer to the playoffs. We'll have some good stuff coming up. But that does it for this episode of the Hockey News Big Show. For Steve Warne and Michael Traikos, I'm Katie Gaus, and we will see you guys next time.